Hello, hello, and hello. Welcome back to another video about angels, of which we are almost complete. This is our third in the series, so I encourage you to go back if you have not and look at the angels video according to the Holy Bible, which is the Protestant edition of this video. And then the follow-up to that was angels, the Catholic explanation, which is self-explanatory. So here we are to the Jewish explanation of what angels are, which arguably, well, it's not really arguably, it is the OG of the Abrahamic faiths. So really what they say should be the truth, the end-all be-all to interpretations of God, the one God, and, of all things there within. But for whatever reason, that is not the case, and that's why we have Catholicism and all of its sects, and Protestantism and all of its sects, as well as the Islamic faith, and then a ton of other spin-offs, which are none of those. But even within Judaism, there are many different kinds of Judaism. There's Orthodox Judaism, there's Conservative Judaism, there's like a Reformed Judaism, there is Kabbalah. There's more than that. It goes on and on and on. So, much like the other videos, this is a very, very, very condensed version of what angels are according to this specific religion that we are speaking of. So, this is the top surface of Judaism that I'm going to be focusing on. A lot of the information I pulled is from Orthodox Judaism, which is like the OG Judaism. So, keep that in mind. Now, yes, as I said with Catholicism, they go in so deeply about what an angel is. And they give you many, many names, many explanations, very vivid details of what they look like and what they do. We won't be going into that, otherwise this video would be, as I said before, hours long. Truly, that's not an exaggeration. So, this, as I said, is skimming the surface. As I said, all of my information is being pulled from Orthodox Judaism. A little bit of Reformed Judaism in there, or Conservative Judaism. And just a little bit of Kabbalah. I may make a separate video in the future about angels in Kabbalah. But my next video in this series will be angels in Islamic faith, in Islam. So, with that said, let's get started. This will be very, very convoluted, as are the other videos in this series, just because we're talking about angels. This is such a broad topic. It's the same as if I made a video on the Fae and tried to document each type of Fae according to each culture that believes in Fae. That would take forever. And it's the same with these angels. I don't know why I went through this endeavor, but here we are, and you're welcome. So, according to Judaism, angels essentially are exactly the same as what we know from Catholicism and Protestantism, which is that they are messengers of God, they are warriors for God, they are protectors of God's creation, or creations. That's the same across the board in all Abrahamic faiths that we've looked into so far. What I think is interesting here with angels is that they're really not described in any Jewish texts as being winged creatures, as being human-like or humanoid in some way. Now, there is some instances of them kind of disguising themselves in a human form, but essentially, if we look at the Hebrew word, for angel, I'm really struggle with pronouncing Judaism, so you have to, give me some slack here a little, but it is malachim. Now, in Catholicism, we saw there is a type of angel called a malachim. But in Judaism, there's malach, which is the Hebrew word for an angel. And when we say Hebrew, The Hebrews and the Jews are the same people. Their name has just changed over time. And the language they speak is Jewish or Hebrew. So, biblically speaking, they're referred to as the Hebrews. Just so we're all on the same page. So, again, before we get real deep, disclaimer, I am not a Jew. I was not raised Jewish. I have no friends or family that were raised Jewish or are currently Jewish. So with that said, I am pulling this all from my own research. So if I am incorrect and you know from your own personal experience as someone who is Jewish about angels in your faith, please comment below, correct me if I'm wrong, or expand on what I've said. I would love to hear from you. Okay, continuing on. So angels. As we said, they're essentially the same as they are in Catholicism and in Protestantism. And their name, Malak, means messenger. So, hello, baseline, that is what an angel is, which we've already established. They are messengers of God, of God's word. So, one thing I think is interesting, and it makes me think of Islam, which I know we haven't made that video yet, but in the Islamic traditions, even dating back to like even dating back to pre-Islamic traditions in the Middle East, there's this concept of a entity called a jinn, and you may know them as a genie, but as a jinn, D-J-I-N-N, I believe, and those are creatures of fire, or creatures of smokeless fire. And what I think is interesting here in Judaism is that in the Tanakh, which is the Jewish holy text, like the main, they are described as beings of flame, or as creatures of fire. However, these do not seem to be smokeless, as there are instances throughout, particularly in, I wrote it down, particularly in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 3 through 4, there's an instance where an angel does come to Isaiah and enters the church or the synagogue and fills the room with smoke from its voice. Its voice is so powerful that the church shakes, it quakes, and it is filled with smoke from the power of this angel's voice. So, interesting to note. Also, in that specific instance, the smoke and the presence of the angel came to cleanse Isaiah. And this angel was described as a seraphim, which we've already learned about from Catholicism and Protestantism. And I just think that's interesting. He felt very unclean and unworthy after he saw the angel, thinking, I'm nothing like that. How am I deserving of God and God's love? And so the angel came and protected him and said, "Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips." Sorry, this is what Isaiah said. "Of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." That's Isaiah 6:5. And then one of the seraphim flew in to Isaiah, touched his mouth with a live coal that had been taken from an altar. And once the seraph touched Isaiah's lips with this burning coal, the angel said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out." And that is Isaiah 6, verses 6 through 7. So I thought that was interesting. There's another instance where an angel comes to Zechariah in his book, the book of Zechariah, and that is chapter 3, verse 3, where Zechariah was dressed in filthy clothes, and he felt unworthy and, gross. He felt bad about himself. And so an angel comes to Zechariah, who, if we'll remember, is someone important because he does help in giving birth. Like, he is the male counterpart to the birth. He helps give birth to John the Baptist, who is a very, very important figure in Abrahamic tradition, particularly Protestantism, but I imagine in all of them. And anyway, the angel comes to him, changes his clothes, gives him festal apparel, like, fancy clothes. And the angel gives him a new turban and everything. And the angel gives them to him, puts them in them, and he says, "See, I have taken your guilt away from you." And thus the removal of the filthy clothing was kind of like a metaphor for healing Zechariah of his guilt. Or no, excuse me. It was Joshua, but in the book of Zechariah. I apologize. So, as you see, angels do seem to do a little bit extra than what we've seen them do in Catholicism and Protestantism. They heal people from impurities. They are healers. They're sin forgivers, which we did see a little bit of in Catholicism. Sometimes it does seem that higher classes of angels, such as seraphim, can act on behalf of God, not just as the middleman to God. We see that also later in also the book of Zechariah, where an angel prays to God in order to put on the behalf of a group of people. I believe it was the cities of Judah. Yeah, the cities of Judah. Judah was multiple cities, I think. But yes, on behalf of these people in Jerusalem, an angel prayed on their behalf to God, which I find interesting, that the angel wouldn't just talk to God, that the angel too would pray to God. I find that interesting. But we have instances of that. We do have instances of angels being warriors and fighting. That's in the book of Daniel, where they're slaying and fighting and, doing their thing on the behalf of God. And I find that interesting. Also interesting is that back in Protestantism, in that video, we learned about archangels and how we only, according to Protestantism, know the name of two archangels, and that is Michael and Gabriel. Michael and Gabriel being Michael, the general of God's army in the book of Revelation against the forces of hell, and then Gabriel being this angel who pretty much is like the stork of angels, because he seems to just deliver babies and the news of babies. So he goes to Zechariah and says, "You're going to have a child called John the Baptist. He's important." And then he comes to the Virgin Mary and says, "You are going to have a baby through immaculate conception. His name is Jesus Christ. He is the Son of God." So, very, very important angel, Gabriel. Well, in Catholicism, we added a third to the archangel group, and that was Raphael. And Raphael is also repeated here in Judaism, but in addition, we get a fourth of those angels, of which we were told there are only 7 by Raphael himself in the Catholic Bible. So we get another name in Judaism, and it is Uriel, who comes up a lot in Kabbalah, which is a Jewish tradition, but was also adapted into Catholicism. So what I think is interesting is these angels are so specific in Judaism. I'm going to read a selection of something I took from a website that I'm trying to remember what website it was. I didn't write down the website. I want to say that it was literally just from a website called Judaica.org. I may be wrong. .com.org. So it says, as the Holy One blessed, that being God, he created 4 winds and 4 banners for Israel's army. So also did he make 4 angels to surround his throne. Now see, this seems to go in contrast with Catholicism, where we're told there were 7. But I digress. So he made 4 angels to surround his throne. Those being Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael. Michael is on the right. It's very specific. Corresponding to the tribe of Reuben. So we see this in Catholicism. If you remember, there was a class of angels specifically devoted to the protection of peoples. So, we seem to be combining a lot of different types of angels we saw in Catholicism into this one class here of archangel. Oh no, excuse me. Yeah, archangel. So, Michael was on his right, corresponding to the tribe of Reuben. Uriel is on his left, corresponding to the tribe of Dan. Dan? I think it's Dan. Which was located in the north. And Gabriel is in the front of the throne, corresponding to the tribe of Judah, as well as Moses and Aaron, who were in the east. And Raphael is in the rear of the throne, corresponding to the tribe of Ephraim, I hope I'm saying that right, which was in the west. I find that fascinating, so specific, but there you go. Now, from what I understand, this is the part where I get a little confused. The Torah, right? So if the Talmud, I think I said that right, is like the Jewish Bible, there's also a sacred text called the Talmud, which is where we got what I just pulled from, that little selection about the directions of the angels. But there is also the Torah, right? But the Torah seems to be a collection of several different scrolls, I think. But in the Mishnah Torah, there is described 10 classes of angels. And that's a lot. And I don't want to make this video super, super long. So we're going to kind of brush through some that we already know. So they do describe this group called the, I'm going to butcher this, the Cheoth HaKadesh. And that is in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 1 through Ezekiel 10. And it's not really described exactly what they do or even what they look like. They're literally just called like citizens of heaven. Like they are just these beings, not even necessarily angels, name dropped as angels, except for saying that they are in the angelic hierarchy. But they seem to just be citizens of heaven. Like they are just creatures, they do not seem to be humanoid in any way, that live in heaven, roam heaven, fill up heaven. I found that interesting. And again, they are described as beings of flame. So then we have our Ophanim, I believe, which is the name here in Judaism for those spinning wheels of flame that are so iconic now across the internet when it comes to angelic imagery. And, they do expand a little bit on Ophanim. I did write something down. So yes, they're the spinning wheels of flame, and they're eye-covered wheels, like covered in eyes. And they are always kind of paired with cherubim, apparently, and are beneath the throne of God in heaven. And I think I wrote down another fun fact. Okay, yeah, it is said that they are actually the wheels of God's chariot, like the chariot. And I find that interesting because that brings into so much imagery of paganism to me, where so many different deities, particularly in the Norse/Anglo-Saxon traditions and the Greco-Roman traditions, so many of those deities are portrayed as having chariots. So I just find it interesting that God himself would have a chariot as well that has many bespoke wheels of flame and eyeballs. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Also, there is a prayer devoted just to those types of angels, which I found very interesting as well. Very interesting. There is a lot more, as I said, on each of these angels, but if I went into detail, we would be here a very long time. So, next, this is third, there is Aralim, or Aralims. And this comes from the book of Isaiah, and these are angels, again, that doesn't go deep into them at all. We are just told that these are angels that are involved in an invasion. And that's it, according to this pulling from. Now, in Kabbalah, as I said, which is a more mystical, metaphysical offshoot of Judaism, all of this is explained in great detail. So if you want to learn more about angels, I would say definitively, instead of looking at Protestantism, Catholicism, Islam, or Judaism by itself, I would honestly just go and look at Kabbalah if you were only going to look in one place. And that's going to give you your full fill on what you want to know about angels, honestly. It is the be-all, tell-all, do-all of angelology, in my opinion. So, yeah, they're angels, and they're name dropped. That's essentially it in this context. Next, we have Hashmalim. And these are also angels that are just kind of name dropped as a class of angels, but aren't really described. We know that their name translates to amber, so that's interesting and beautiful. I think it's weird that word kind of bleeds into the English word of electricity because of the rubbing of amber and cloth producing electricity, but that's kind of random. Fun fact for you there that I saw, so I had to write it down. But that's really all we know about them. We just know that they are surrounded with fire and clouds, and if that is not their body themselves, and that it is the color of Hashmal, which can be translated as electrum, which would mean an amber color. I think that's interesting. It's interesting. But that's really all we know about them. So next we get seraphs or seraphim, which we're very familiar with this at this point if you watch the other two videos. So I won't go into context of them. Then we get malachim, which we also already discussed in Catholicism. It's the same here. And then we get Elohim, which I find bizarre because, in Hebrew traditions, God's name is unpronounceable by human beings. God has many names, but one of which seems to look like Yahweh, because we can divine 4 letters from it. But then also in Jewish texts, they refer to God as Elohim or El Nahim. And that's just supposed to be like the word for God or deity in Hebrew, if I understand correctly. But then here, we are told that also there's a class of angelic entities called Elohim. So I just find that interesting. So as I said, that usually does refer to a single deity, that being God, the God of Israel. However, it can also refer to a group of angels. It does not really go into any other description of what they look like. This is what's frustrating about just Judaism without Kabbalah influence, in my opinion, is that, we're told this 10 list of angels, but then we're not told anything about them. So you really do have to go to Kabbalah for the answers. 8th, we have a class called the B'nai Elohim, I think. Maybe is how you say it. And those are the sons of God. And again, no elaboration, which is so frustrating. Outside of the Kabbalah. In the Kabbalah, all of this is laid out flat. But they seemed to be very popular in the medieval times. Then we have cherubim, which we already know about as well. And then lastly, we do get Ishim, I think. And those are angels that are supposed to be the closestly associated with human beings in terms of like their responsibilities, not necessarily their appearance. They are the ones, according to Judaism, that interact with humans the most and are the most concerned about the protection and welfare of humanity. And again, across the board, all of the angels are usually described as beings of fire if we are not told specifically. These, in this instance, are specific, and I think it's weird because they are described as entities composed of fire and snow. So, I have no idea how to envision that. That is very bizarre. Very bizarre. and I don't understand it. Now, in the Zohar tradition, which is again like this offshoot / subsect within Judaism and Kabbalah, they are said that the leader of them is Azazel, which is interesting because, in Catholicism, Azazel is a fallen angel who joins Satan's army. So, interesting. I guess Azazel brings his own form of snow and coldness to hell, which there's a joke in there somewhere about hell freezing over. But in a nutshell, that is angels according to Judaism without Kabbalah. As I said, we'll make a video about Kabbalah at some point, and it'll be really long. But in the in the Judaic tradition, that is what angels are. They're messengers of God who sometimes act on the behalf of God, who have the ability to heal humans, cleanse humans, forgive humans of sins, deliver messages, fight on God's behalf against the forces of darkness, etc., etc. Essentially, there's a through line of angels, which is good. We're being consistent here. But it seems that with each iteration going backwards in our history of angels, they get more and more complex. So it does seem that angels have been simplified, streamlined, watered down with each Abrahamic tradition, which I find interesting. So, if you found this interesting or educational, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, comment down below on what else you want to see from me on this channel, and look at my links down below also in the drop down box, because there you can find me on Facebook, where you can book a reading with me one-on-one. And I would love to read the cards for you, or the runes, or whatever you're into. So check me out there. Thank you so much, and good